So more on that warning from the United Nations Secretary General, who has called for immediate action to tackle climate change, including phasing out fossil fuels, banning adverts about them and imposing windfall taxes on energy companies. It showed an 80% chance that in at least one of the next 5 years, the limit of 1.5 degrees rise in global temperatures will be breached. Well, António Guterres warns that world leaders must act within 18 months to save humanity's chances of a livable future. Let's have a listen to what he said.
It means we need to fight harder now. The truth is the battle for 1.5 degrees will be won or lost in the 2020s under the watch of leaders today. And all depends on the decisions those leaders take or fail to take, especially in the next 18 months. It's climate crunch time.
Climate crunch time, says the UN Secretary General. Let's talk to our climate editor, Justin Rolat. He sounds pretty frustrated. We've had lots and lots of reports and so on, and it sounds like he feels the world hasn't really got the message.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I wouldn't say he was angry, but I think it's fair to say he's pretty irritated. This was really quite a blistering speech, and it drew together lots of themes that he's talked about before. So one of the things he does is he lays into the fossil fuel companies. He says, look, you're not doing enough, anywhere near enough, to change your economic model, to move away from the coal, oil and gas that we know are driving climate change. He says you're making huge profits, you're feasting, he says, on subsidies from countries, and you really must do more. And he calls on countries to governance. He says you need to clamp down on fossil fuel companies, as you say, impose windfall taxes, restrict advertising. So he compares it to tobacco advertising. I don't think he's just talking about fossil fuels as a product. I think he's talking about, you should restrict advertising for petrol and diesel cars as well. I think he thinks that we really do need to regard this as a poison that is corrupting the world. That's certainly the way that he sees it. So this is really quite a radical speech, and I think you're right that there's real irritation that the world hasn't heard his other calls for action. There's real irritation that governments aren't doing enough. And I think he looks around the world. This is a year of elections, so something like 75% of the world's democracies are voting this year, and he's like, where's the debate about climate change? Where's the debate about this issue that will literally shape the nature of the world that our descendants will live in? Why aren't we talking about that, is what he wants to know. And he's saying to governments, look, it's you guys, you heard it in that speech he made, it's your responsibility now to begin to take action, because what we do now will determine the temperature for literally hundreds of years to come.
And he feels they haven't listened to him before. Is there any evidence they will listen any more to what he's said with this speech? Will the governments listen? Will the big companies listen?
I mean, the kind of physical logic of what he's saying is really compelling. So one of the many reports that came out today, and it's no coincidence that the reports all came out today because they want to bolster his message with scientific evidence. One of them looked at what they call the carbon budget. How much carbon can we emit into the atmosphere before we pass this 1.5 degree limit? And this group of international climate scientists, led by a team in Leeds University here in the UK, said they reckon we've got about 200 billion tonnes. Now that sounds like a lot, doesn't it? How much are we emitting every year? 40 billion tonnes, which means that's where his 5-year figure comes from. 5, 40s, 200, that's how much time we've got left before there's a stock of carbon in the atmosphere that will, with a physical inevitability, cause the planet to warm by 1.5 degrees. And that's interesting because you heard the other thing he said was, look, you've got to start within 18 months. He's saying, look, you've got 5 years to sort the problem out. You've got to start now if you're going to stand any chance of getting anywhere near it. So he's saying, look, I mean, obviously we hear these warnings all the time, but this is a man at the end of his tenure as UN General Secretary becoming really frustrated and saying, listen, this is a hugely important issue for us all. Get started on it.
Justin, good to talk to you. Thank you so much. Justin Rolat there, our climate editor.